Good morning. This morning I want to speak about stress. Uh, I know a lot of my students are studying stress, and also it might be useful for those of you that are out there having problems with stress. Stress can be explained as a state of unpleasant tension in the body and the mind, which is caused by a person's inability to cope with what is seen or perceived as a physical, emotional, psychological threat to his sense or her sense of well-being. In other words, normally becoming stressed involves a certain level of thinking and decision making, and as well as the belief that one is not coping or competent with the situation. Any event can cause stress in everyday life if it becomes a bit too intense. Relationships, problems at work, at home, or even finances. What is interesting is that we know that even a small stressor, like a fender bender accident, can cause extreme stress for one person, but actually doesn't bother another. So there are individual differences in people coping with stress. This is a very important aspect, this perception, as will be seen in the contextual model of stress. Personal interpretation of the stressor or the situation is very important. This can actually occur at a pre-conscious level. In other words, you're not actually thinking at the moment, at that time. It's all just happening, and it's coming from it's like a subconscious program, like a script that you have, which will then say, I'm not coping with this, and it's just too much for me. And you're not even aware that you're saying that to yourself. It's taking place at the sort of just under the subconscious, just at the subconscious level. What is important is that also a lot of other factors affect one's coping with stress or stress experience. For instance, personality and culture. One's personality, if one is prone to anxiety, one will become stressed quicker. One's culture, some cultures discourage emotional responses, while other cultures encourage an emotional response. It also depends on the person's past experiences. In other words, if someone has had a very bad experience in the past with a dog, let's say it was bitten by a large dog when they were younger, and now they see a dog in the street and the dog is loose, their experience of stress will be far greater than a person who has never had that experience, who has a very positive view of dogs. Research does say that a little stress is necessary at times for people to perform at their best. You may have seen the Yerkes-Dodson curve, where it shows you that performance increases as one's stress or excitement level rises, but eventually it reaches a point of optimum stress, where anything after that, any worse stress, exposure to stress, then the performance starts declining. In other words, the person simply becomes unable to cope, and the work performance and anything, relationships, everything will suffer. So it's normal for an athlete to be hyped up before a race. It all depends on the interpretation and severity of the life event. Let me look at a few more factors underlying a typical stress response. As I said, a person's response to stress is influenced by a number of personal factors. For instance, some stress-related traits are inherited. A person has got a high anxiety level, naturally, a low stress tolerance, chemical imbalances in the body. Negative past experiences as a child can also play a role, as I've mentioned about the dog. Also, one's self-esteem, low self-esteem or poor self-image or inadequate coping will also make a person more prone to stress. Also, weak social or interpersonal skills. In other words, the person is simply not mature enough to cope with the situation, what we would regard as a normal situation, and to them it becomes a stressor. Other aspects of normal life, such as a shortage of money, an argument with a friend, or breakup with a lover, could also be, quite severe for someone who is prone to anxiety and prone to stress. So if you look at that, you'll see that our past circumstances also play a role in our present coping. If things are at home are not what they should be, for instance, we're living in a home with difficult relationships, neglect, even violence or substance abuse, we will already be experiencing a level of stress. And any additional stressor could push us over the edge, because these stresses accumulate and affect our ability to cope. If it becomes just too much, as we saw with the Yerkes-Dodson curve, and it becomes too much, everything just starts deteriorating. So weak and effective ways of child rearing can be a problem. Adults being unable to cope effectively with the normal challenges of life because they've been sheltered as children, or abused as children, giving them a low self-esteem. So a good family system, friends and community structures can provide help for people who have stress. But then again, not everybody has access to such a support base. Finally, I just want to show that even culture and society itself can affect the way that we experience stress. Work stress is very common in societies which focus on work performance and accumulation of money, riches, because they create expectations. And these expectations and the taboos as well, don't do this, don't do that, can also put undue pressure on men and women, which can lead to stress, especially amongst teenagers. In fact, we've noticed in this country that there's a lot of teenage suicides in this country, and this has been blamed to a large extent on the media, and as well as the acceptance of emotional problems and the lack of support. And of course, any violence that we have in the country will only fuel our insecurities and make it more difficult to cope. In some cases, religious beliefs can actually help though. A stable value system will help us to reduce stress. Not everybody has such a system. In fact, some cultures, as I said, do not even encourage soft interventions to stress. They basically say, deal with it. Cowboys don't cry. So there are a lot of factors involved in causing stress in our lives and how we cope with it. And I hope that this talk has given you some insight, and it will supplement any studies that you are busy with. Thank you.